Lieutenant Jack Carter had been on a lot of strange diplomatic missions, but this one took the cake. Sitting across from him was Ambassador Thrixol, a tall, elegant insectoid humanoid from the Zyxari species. Her exoskeleton shimmered under the artificial lights, and her four eyes blinked in a slow, calculating manner. She was the official representative of the Zyxari people, an advanced race that had finally agreed to meet humans for a cultural exchange. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of alien technology. Jack adjusted his uniform, cleared his throat, and smiled. "So, Ambassador Thrixol, let me start by saying that humanity is honored to be here. We look forward to learning about your culture and way of life." Thrixol tilted her head. "Yes, Lieutenant Carter. Knowledge exchange is vital for interspecies relations. We Zyxari have studied your history, your technological progress, and even your biological structure." Jack nodded. "So far, so good." But then Thrixol continued. "We have one major question about your species, something quite shocking." Jack raised an eyebrow. Sure. Ask away." Thrixol leaned forward, her antennae twitching. "We have studied many species in the galaxy. Most have efficient reproductive systems, external incubation, genetic fusion chambers, or biotechnological cloning. But humans, you have a biological reproductive organ, an internal one." She paused, shuddering. "That is horrifying." Jack froze. His mind raced for a professional response, but all he managed was, excuse me." Thrixol's mandibles clicked. "Your species grows offspring inside its own body, and then pushes them out through a fleshy canal." Her voice had a mixture of disbelief and disgust. "And the process involves, what was it called? Live birth." Jack felt heat rise to his face. This was not the diplomatic conversation he had prepared for. Well, yeah, that's normal for us," he said, shifting uncomfortably. Thrixol recoiled slightly. "But how do you not rupture your fragile anatomy? How do you survive such an inefficient, dangerous process?" Jack sighed. "We just do. Humans are tough. We've been doing it for millions of years." The room fell silent as Thrixol and the other Zyxari scientists stared at him. One of them, a researcher, whispered something in their own language. Thrixol nodded, then turned back to Jack. "This explains so much," she muttered. Jack blinked. "Explains what?" Thrixol stood up. "Why humans are so aggressive. Why you are so resilient. You have evolved through pure suffering." She took a step back, as if seeing Jack in a whole new light. "Your species chooses to endure agony for survival. This is terrifying and impressive." Jack groaned. "Look, can we not make my biology sound like a horror movie?" Thrixol ignored him. She was already taking notes. The other Zyxari were whispering excitedly. Humanity had just become the most fascinating species in the galaxy. Jack had a bad feeling about where this was going. Jack Carter sat in the Zyxari research facility, feeling more like a lab specimen than a diplomat. Across from him, Ambassador Thrixol and a group of Zyxari scientists were staring at him with a mixture of fascination and horror. "So," Thrixol began, tapping her long fingers against the table, "let us confirm our understanding. Human reproduction requires two individuals, one with a—" She hesitated, glancing at her datapad, "male organ and one with a female organ." Jack sighed. "Yes." The Zyxari scientists muttered among themselves. One of them, a shorter insectoid with glowing blue eyes, turned to him. "And these two individuals must engage in physical contact. You combine your genetic material inside your bodies." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "That's how it works, yeah." A ripple of disgust passed through the Zyxari group. Thrixol's antennae twitched. "Primitive, messy, highly inefficient." Jack frowned. "It works just fine for us." Another scientist spoke up. "But why? Why not just externalize the process? Use genetic fusion chambers or bioreplication tanks. Many advanced species do this. Jack shrugged. We don't have those. We reproduce naturally. It's just biology. Freaksole shook her head. Biology is meant to evolve. Yet your species still relies on this risky method. Pregnancy lasts for months. Your young are helpless at birth. The process itself can be fatal. Jack ran a hand down his face. Look, I'm not saying it's perfect, but humans adapt. We survive. The room went silent. The Zyxari stared at him, their expressions unreadable. Finally, Freaksole spoke. This explains why your species is so durable. Jack blinked. Come again. Freaksole gestured to the holographic display in front of her. Your entire species evolved under extreme biological stress. Pain, risk, and survival pressures shaped your genetics. You were forced to become resilient, to push through suffering. She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. This is why humans are so dangerous. Jack chuckled nervously. I wouldn't say we're dangerous. But you are. Freaksole interrupted. You fight wars. You endure wounds that would kill most species. You push your bodies to their limits. And now we understand why. Your own reproductive system trained your species to endure suffering from birth. Jack sighed. Great, so now we're the hardcore survival species because of childbirth. The Zyxari scientists whispered among themselves. Finally, one of them turned to Jack and asked, would you be willing to provide more samples for study? Jack's eyes widened. Absolutely not. Freaksole nodded. Understandable. But be warned, Lieutenant Carter, your species has drawn much interest. Many will wish to learn more about this strange human endurance. Jack groaned. He had come here for diplomacy. Instead, he had become a scientific curiosity. And something told him this was only the beginning. You said. Jack Carter walked through the Zyxari research station, feeling the weight of 100 curious alien eyes on him. Ever since that awkward conversation about human reproduction, things had only gotten worse. At first, he thought it would blow over. Surely the Zyxari had better things to do than obsess over human biology, right? Wrong. Now, everywhere he went, Zyxari scientists whispered as he passed. He had overheard phrases like biological anomaly, unnecessary pain tolerance, and evolutionary insanity. Some even stared at him like he was some kind of ultra-resilient beast. Jack sighed as he entered the diplomatic hall. Freaksole was waiting for him, tapping her long fingers against a glowing datapad. She looked up, her 4 eyes blinking in quick succession. Lieutenant Carter, she said, we have more questions. Jack groaned. Please tell me this isn't about human anatomy again. Freaksole tilted her head. It is about humans, but not just your biology. We wish to understand how your species survives everything. Jack frowned. What do you mean? Freaksole pulled up a holographic display. We have analyzed your history. Your people should not exist. You thrive on a planet with deadly predators, harsh climates, and constant war. You survive wounds that would kill most species. Your soldiers keep fighting even after losing limbs. Your scientists push the limits of physics despite constant risk. And all of this despite your primitive reproduction process. Jack crossed his arms. Are you saying we're too tough? Yes, Freaksole said simply. You are an evolutionary paradox. Your bodies are fragile, yet you endure. Your biology is inefficient, yet you adapt. You lack advanced genetic engineering, yet you overcome every challenge. How? Jack smirked. Because we're human. We don't give up. Freaksole stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned to her fellow scientists and said something in her language. The others nodded, making quick notes. Jack sighed. Okay, what did you just tell them? Freaksole looked back at him. That humans are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. Jack blinked. Wait, what? Freaksole tapped on her datapad. We have encountered warlike species before. The Vactor are strong but predictable. The Drolvians are brutal but lack adaptability. But humans, you suffer, you endure, you evolve under pressure. This makes you highly unpredictable, and unpredictability is dangerous. Jack chuckled. So let me get this straight. Because we're stubborn, we scare you. Threeksoul nodded. Yes, and it is fascinating. Jack rubbed his temples. Great. First, we're biological disasters, and now we're galactic threats. What's next? Threeksoul's mandibles twitched in amusement. The universe will want to learn more about humans, Lieutenant Carter, whether you like it or not. Jack had a feeling his life was about to get even more complicated. Jack Carter sat in the Xeri Research Station's cafeteria, poking at an unidentifiable blue gelatin that was supposed to be nutritious for most species. Across from him, Threeksoul sipped a thick, green liquid that smelled vaguely of metal. You still thinking about how weird humans are? Jack asked with a smirk. Threeksoul set down her drink. Always. Jack chuckled and took a cautious bite of the gelatin. It tasted like stale rubber. He sighed and pushed it away. So, what's the latest human discovery that's blowing your minds? Threeksoul leaned forward. Your species' genetic flexibility. Jack blinked. Come again. Threeksoul pulled up a holographic display. We Xeri are highly advanced, but our biology is stable, almost too stable. We do not mutate easily. Our genetics remain the same for millennia. This has allowed us to maintain our civilization, but also made us vulnerable. Jack raised an eyebrow. Vulnerable how? Threeksoul hesitated. Our genetic stability comes at a cost. We do not adapt quickly to change. If a virus mutates, it can devastate our people before we can adjust. If our environment shifts, we struggle to evolve. But humans, your species mutates constantly. Your DNA adapts at an alarming rate. Even individual humans can develop resistance to diseases in just a few generations. Jack shrugged. Yeah, evolution. Pretty useful. Threeksoul's eyes narrowed. Useful? It is terrifying. Your species can survive conditions that would wipe out most civilizations. Your adaptability is not just biological. It is mental, technological, and social. You bend, but you do not break. Jack leaned back in his chair. So, let me guess. You're worried about something. Threeksoul tapped her fingers on the table. The Xeri have existed for millions of years, but recently we have noticed a problem. Our genetic pool is weakening. Without adaptation, we are becoming fragile. Jack frowned. Are you saying your species is dying out? Threeksoul hesitated, then nodded. Not immediately, but slowly over time. If we cannot adapt, we may not survive the next great catastrophe. Jack exhaled. That's a big problem. Threeksoul studied him carefully. Humans may hold the key to our survival. Jack blinked. Wait. What? Threeksoul's antennae twitched. Your DNA is unpredictable. Flexible. It may be possible to study it, perhaps even integrate some aspects into our own genome. Jack sat up. Hold on. You're not saying you want to genetically modify your people with human DNA, are you? Threeksoul tilted her head. Would that be so strange? You already modify your own genetics with medicine, vaccines, and bioengineering. We Xeri simply wish to learn. Jack rubbed his temples. Great. First, I was a diplomatic officer. Then I became a science project. And now you're telling me humans might save your species. Threeksoul's mandibles twitched in amusement. It would appear so. Jack sighed. Yeah, that's not gonna cause any problems at all. Something told him the galaxy was about to get very complicated. Jack Carter sat in stunned silence, staring at Threeksoul. The Xeri ambassador had just casually suggested using human DNA to enhance her species, as if it were no big deal. Jack shook his head. Let me get this straight. You want to experiment with human genetics to make your people more adaptable. Freaksoul nodded. Correct. Jack sighed. Yeah, no, that's not happening. Freaksoul tilted her head. Why not? Jack leaned forward. Because messing with DNA is dangerous. You don't just mix species together like a smoothie and hope for the best. That's how horror movies start. Freaksoul's mandibles twitched. We would not proceed without caution. We are highly advanced in genetic science. We could study human adaptability without direct modification at first. Jack crossed his arms. Still sounds like a bad idea. Freaksoul observed him for a moment before speaking. Do you know why the Xiaxari are interested in humans, Lieutenant Carter? Jack shrugged. Because we survive ridiculous things. Freaksoul leaned forward. Because we fear what we do not understand. And humans are the first species to make us afraid in a very, very long time. Jack raised an eyebrow. Afraid of us. Freaksoul nodded. You are unpredictable. Your resilience defies logic. Your species thrives in chaos. And now we realize that your biology, your very existence, challenges everything we thought we knew about evolution. Jack smirked. So, what? You want to steal some of that human toughness for yourselves? Freaksoul hesitated. Not steal. Learn. Adapt. Survive. If the Xiaxari do not evolve, we may become extinct in the distant future. Jack sighed. Look, I get it, but genetic experiments. That's a dangerous road. Who's to say it won't backfire? Freaksoul was silent for a moment, then asked, would your people not do the same if they were facing extinction? Jack hesitated. That was a tough question. Humanity had always adapted, always found a way to survive. If Earth were dying, if humans had no other choice, would they take such a risk? He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. Maybe. But I do know that playing with genetics has consequences. Freaksoul studied him carefully. That is why we need your help. To understand those consequences. Jack groaned. Great. So now I'm not just a diplomat, not just a science project, but an ethical advisor on alien genetics. Freaksoul's mandibles twitched in amusement. You are human. That alone makes you valuable. Jack exhaled. He had a feeling this wasn't going to end with just studying DNA. And if history had taught him anything, it was that when humans and science mixed, things never went as planned. You said. Jack Carter paced inside his assigned quarters, deep in thought. The Xiaxari were serious about studying human genetics. Too serious. And that made him uneasy. A chime rang from the door. He sighed. Come in. The door slid open, and Freaksoul entered, holding a small data pad. Her 4 eyes studied him carefully. You seem troubled, Lieutenant Carter. Jack crossed his arms. Yeah, because I don't like where this is going. First, you call humans biological anomalies. Then, we're dangerous. Now, we're suddenly the key to saving your species. Feels like a trap. Freaksoul tilted her head. It is not a trap. It is an opportunity. For both our species. Jack scoffed. Oh yeah? How exactly do humans benefit from this? Freaksoul's antennae twitched. Imagine what we could offer. Xiaxari technology is far beyond your own. Medical advancements, disease resistance, even extended lifespans. A true exchange of knowledge could benefit humanity greatly. Jack frowned. That sounds nice, but messing with genetics has consequences. Humans aren't lab rats. We don't just hand over our DNA because someone asks nicely. Freaksoul hesitated, then stepped forward. You fear the unknown. That is understandable. But humans, more than any other species, have always embraced the unknown. You conquer it. You thrive in it. That is what makes you unique. Jack exhaled. Yeah, we adapt. But sometimes we go too far. Ever hear of history's worst scientific disasters? People experimenting on things they shouldn't. That's how you end up with nightmares instead of progress. Freaksoul's mandibles clicked in thought. Then guide us. Help us proceed carefully. If humans are so adaptable, perhaps you can help us adapt without risk." Jack ran a hand down his face. This was a mess. He hadn't signed up to be a scientific consultant for an entire alien species. But at the same time, the Zyxari were right about one thing. Humanity had always found a way to survive, no matter the cost. He sat down with a sigh. "All right, say I do help. No human experiments. No reckless DNA splicing. You focus on studying adaptability first, our history, our biology, our endurance." "Got it." Threaksol nodded. "Agreed. We will proceed with caution. But know this, Lieutenant Carter, this path we walk could change both our species forever." Jack smirked. "Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of." As Threaksol left, Jack leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The Zyxari had opened a door that might never close. And deep down, Jack had a feeling that humanity's strangest chapter was just beginning. Jack Carter stood in the Zyxari research lab, watching the scientists move with precise, insect-like efficiency. Strange holographic displays flickered in the air, showing genetic sequences, human biological data, and complex equations that made his head hurt just looking at them. Threaksol approached, her 4 eyes focused on a glowing console. "We have begun our initial studies based on human adaptability. No direct genetic manipulation, only observation and simulation, as you requested." Jack crossed his arms. "Good. So, what's the first test?" Threaksol gestured toward a large enclosed chamber. Inside, a small plant-like organism squirmed in a tank. Its blue leaves twitched under artificial light. "This is the Slivex plant," she explained. "It is highly sensitive to environmental changes. Unlike most species, it does not evolve over thousands of years. It adapts within hours." Jack frowned. "Wait, you have a plant that can change itself instantly?" Threaksol nodded. "Correct. We believe its genetic structure is similar to the way humans develop immunity or physical resilience over generations, but far faster. We wish to compare it with human biology to understand if there are similar mechanisms." Jack scratched his chin. "All right. So what's the plan?" Threaksol pointed to a second chamber beside the first. "We will expose the Slivex to a controlled environmental change, heat, cold, radiation, and observe its response. Then we will compare it to human endurance in similar conditions." Jack blinked. "Wait, what do you mean compare it to human endurance?" Threaksol's mandibles twitched. "We need a human subject for observation." Jack groaned. "Oh, come on. Let me guess, I'm the test subject." Threaksol tilted her head. "You are the only human available at the moment." Jack sighed. "Of course I am." Moments later, he found himself standing inside a second chamber, watching as the Zyxari activated their experiment. First, they cranked up the heat. Inside the first chamber, the Slivex's leaves darkened, thickening to store moisture. It curled its roots inward, conserving energy. Jack, meanwhile, wiped sweat from his brow. "Okay. Hot, but not unbearable." Then they dropped the temperature. The Slivex turned pale, its leaves flattening to absorb more heat. Meanwhile, Jack shivered but clenched his fists. "Still, fine. Just cold." Finally, the Zyxari activated a mild radiation pulse, safe, but strong enough to test resilience. The Slivex reacted instantly, shifting its outer layer to block the energy. Jack, however, just stood there. Nothing's happening to me." Threaksol's eyes widened. "Exactly. The Slivex actively changes itself. But humans? You simply endure." Jack smirked. "Yeah, that's kind of our thing." Threaksol looked at him in amazement. Perhaps that is the secret of humanity. Not rapid adaptation, but unbreakable will. Jack chuckled. "Took you this long to figure that out?" He had a feeling this experiment was just the beginning. Jack Carter sat on the examination table while Zyxari scientists ran scans over him. Strange alien instruments hummed, flashing colors he didn't recognize. He had just spent hours inside their test chamber, enduring everything they threw at him. Extreme heat, freezing cold, and even controlled radiation. And through it all, his body had done nothing special. No sudden transformations, no instant adaptations. He had simply endured. Freaksoul stood nearby, watching the results. Her antennae twitched in fascination. Your species continues to surprise us, Lieutenant Carter. Jack sighed. Yeah, I get that a lot. What's the verdict? Freaksoul gestured to a holographic display. The Slivex plant reacts to stress by rapidly altering itself. Other species we have studied, reptilian, insectoid, even some mammalian, have similar traits. But humans? You do not react. You resist. Jack smirked. Toughness is kind of our thing. Freaksoul nodded. But it is more than toughness. Most species either adapt quickly or perish. But humans, your bodies, your minds, seem designed to withstand suffering instead of avoiding it. It is illogical. Jack chuckled. Welcome to humanity. We don't always make sense, but we sure don't quit. Freaksoul turned to her team. The Zuixari scientists exchanged notes, their mandibles clicking in excitement. Then, Freaksoul looked back at Jack. There is something else. Jack raised an eyebrow. Oh boy. What now? Freaksoul hesitated before speaking. Your species does not just endure physically. You endure emotionally, mentally. We have studied your history. War, disaster, hardship. You survive it all. And despite suffering, you continue to advance. Jack leaned back. You're saying we don't just survive. We keep going no matter what. Freaksoul nodded. Precisely. It is not just biological resilience. It is willpower. Even when facing extinction, humans push forward instead of surrendering. Jack's smirk faded slightly. He thought about Earth's history, the wars, the struggles, the disasters humanity had overcome. Yeah, that sounds about right. Freaksoul watched him closely. This makes your species dangerous. Jack frowned. Dangerous? We're just survivors. Freaksoul's mandibles twitched. No, you are more than that. Other species fight to live, but humans fight to win. You do not simply adapt to hardship. You overcome it. You change the rules of survival itself. Jack exhaled. So what? You're afraid of us now? Freaksoul was silent for a moment before speaking. Not afraid. But we now understand why the galaxy watches humanity so closely. Jack stood up, rolling his shoulders. Well, glad I could help with your little science experiment. But what happens now? Freaksoul's 4 eyes blinked in unison. Now, we continue to learn. Because if humans truly have no limits, then the universe is not ready for what comes next. Jack chuckled. Trust me, lady, you haven't seen anything yet. And deep down, he knew she was right. Humanity had only just begun.